And first up is Greg Peterson in the In Memoriam. That does not mean Greg is no longer with us, but he is going to say a fond farewell to some of the Jackson Center family members that we have lost this year. So Greg, please.
Yeah, I sat at the table with Arnie and Jill and Kitty and Bluey and Stacy late. And so they were really concerned because they had read exactly what everybody else had read and said, "Oh, I'm so glad that you're among the living." So, yeah, it is a strange way it's presented. I am thrilled, first of all, that here we are 23 years later after the beginning of the Jackson Center, and to have folks that everybody here we could tell stories about, because you've connected with us and connected strongly with us. And I won't do that because what I'm going to do is to talk about some people who we've been standing on the shoulders of, who passed away this year. Now, some of the names you may not know, but they're connected because every one of us has been supported through the years by spouses. And it's amazing, it's a team. Sometimes we get some of the glory, but in fact, behind it all are a spouse. And so I'm going to recognize a few of those folks, and you'll appreciate why. And some family members who've been incredibly supportive. One of the people that just passed away, I think he was over 100 years old, was Merrill Cooper, who you would not have known, but you would have known Marion Beckerink. And Marion Beckerink's father. And he was incredibly supportive of Marion's role here and her involvement in so many other things as well. And she was near and dear to her dad, just passed away this past year. For those who remember the William Rehnquist visit, if you remember at the beginning, we had choir masters and we had Brian Bogey, and it was one of the really most meaningful C-SPAN moments that we had. And behind that all, and doing the preparation with Brian Bogey, was Sandy Bogey, and she likewise passed away as part of the team of the Bogies as well. Another person that recently passed away, and if you're in a local community, he was almost iconic, Ron Graham. Ron Graham, Ron was the founder of Infinity and founder of so many organizations which had dealt with education, dealt with civil rights. And what you don't know is Ron, in the early days when we were going, getting excited, and we had opportunities to bring in the Brown sisters, to bring in James Meredith, to bring in Dorothy Cotton, to bring in a whole lot of folks who were civil rights icons. It was Ron. Ron who was there encouraging us. And Ron, if you got, and Alexis is smiling, he did more than encourage. He kind of was there. And so Ron passed away this past year, but I always have incredible fond memories. So many of our early programs were in fact surrounding Ron Graham. An attorney out of Little Valley, New York, named Frank Della Posta. Again, these are people that you may not have known, but we had continuing legal education programs for many, many years, still do. It brought in a lot of interesting talent, a lot of interesting programs, but behind many of those was a guy named Frank Della Posta. Frank Della Posta was in Little Valley, and I know Judge Cass knew Frank, and just a meaningful guy. In fact, he brought in help me out here, I think it's Armeni, John, big lawsuit. Harmony, thank you. And he brought him here. Another person, and I've got to pause and reflect, is a guy named Tom Stafford. Tom Stafford owned the property on Fairmont Avenue, which is the Robert Jackson homestead. Now that was in somewhat deep disrepair. And Tom, to his personal credit, paused and put the house back into repair. And it is a showcase in the area. And along that ways, as reached out to Kristen and I, we spent time decorating much of that in Jackson memorabilia, Jackson heritage. And Tom was very, very supportive. And at some point, you'll see some Wayfarer signs from New York State there as well. Many of you know Jim Roselli, WJTN. And Jim, at the beginning, I mean, day one, some of us who were there with Rehnquist and the Nuremberg, especially the Nuremberg people in 2001. Jim held court interviewing all of those people, and for as long as he lived, he would call us and have us on the program. He would be here, he'd doing live presentations, and the guy behind that who paid his bills was Merrill Rosen. Merrill Rosen, WJTN, and he passed away also this past year. We've had the pleasure of having a Pennsylvania Supreme Court Justice. Subsequently, he was the Chief Judge, the Honorable Max Baer. Max Baer, through the good graces of the Pennsylvania court system, brought him here. Not only did he speak in Warren, but he came here and did all of this touring. There's great pictures of him spending about 3 hours doing in this room, looking at all of these exhibits. But he too passed away. John and I had the privilege of being representing the Robert H. Jackson Center at Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen for the March to the Living, and we were really honored, and we got it was really extraordinary. And part and parcel of that, we had a chance to meet Rosalie Silberman Abella, the Honorable. She was a Canadian. She's still alive. Canadian Supreme Court Justice, just retired, but she came here with her husband, Irving. And Irving was an extraordinary individual unto himself, a tremendous writer and a tremendous influence. But he too was here, but he passed away this past year. For many, many years, I'm looking at Allie Russell now, we had the wonderful privilege of having Mark Russell, and I'm going to talk about Mark in greater detail in a few minutes, but have events at the Chautauqua Suites. And that all happened because of the McConnens, Van and Wilma McConnon, who owned the Chautauqua Suites, and they had supported us by hosting these major events, which we had Phil Donahue, we've had Mark Russell several times, and he covered everything, soup to nuts, as his contributions, and it was Wilma who encouraged Van to do that, and we unfortunately lost her. In 2008, we were at the Jackson Center, spent a lot of excitement in going to honor the 100th birthday of Thurgood Marshall. And in doing so, we were going to have here Cece Marshall, his widow, and she was going to come. Unfortunately, she got sick at the last minute, but was unable to come. But what she did, and she was really a major factor in Washington society, and certainly within the Supreme Court, because they had a Supreme Court, I kind of blew the name, but it's a wives' society. It was at the Spouses. And she led the charge in with Juanita, who was very close friends with her, and invited several of you. I'm looking at several of you folks here who were there basically as the host, Peggy, of CC, and she passed away. But she was very gracious in permitting us to do a lot of things there on behalf of the Jackson Center in Washington to kibitz with the spouses. When she could not come in 2008, and John did a tremendous presentation and did a lot of research talking about the relationship of Thurgood Marshall and Robert Jackson and the Supreme Court and using the ring and all that stuff. Ask John about it. It's a very, very good story. Time won't permit me to talk about it now. But we were in a little bit of a crisis mode because we didn't have our speaker. We were in a little bit of a crisis. As would have it, thanks to Allie Russell once again, Robin Smith and her husband Bill Plant happened to be on the grounds. Bill Plant, for those that remember CBS News, White House correspondent extraordinaire, but also covered the civil rights. So thank you, Allie, again, for introducing Robin, which in turn got us to Bill, which in turn he came and saved the day big time. Big time. So we have Bill Plant there, but he passed away likewise. The last three are really special people. One is Doug Neckers. Last year at this time, you may remember, I did a similar thing, and Doug was sitting kind of where you are, Sam, and don't panic, Sam. And we talked about his spouse, again, teamwork. Susan Neckers encouraged Doug, and Doug was a force of nature. And Doug passed away really COVID related this past year, and some of us went to his funeral. Doug was really with us from the beginning, 2001, and all the former board members can know that Doug was a force of nature, and but a leader, and variously came in to be he encouraged us to be involved in educational opportunities. He encouraged us to be involved in a lot of, whether it was Nuremberg programming, whether it was at Bowling Green University, whether it was in Toledo, Ohio. He got us out and about. And Doug loved the Jackson Center. Doug loved the Chautauqua County. He loved Clymer, New York. He was a tremendous asset to it, and he was a chairman for a period of time. So we lost him this year, and we lost a real person that had broad shoulders for our purposes. Ben Ferencz. I don't even know where to begin. Iconic. The last of the Nuremberg trials, I'll use that plural, prosecutors, 103 years old. He was here. But our first experience was with, I'm looking at Chuck Gustafson. Chuck was involved in Georgetown University. Stan may remember. We had an event where the Georgetown Law, through the American Bar Association back in 2005, let us be a co-sponsor, costing us nothing, just to have national attention. The speaker was Ben Ferencz, Henry King, Whitney Harris, people that were part of our world. But it's my first introduction to Ben. And so through Don, I actually, and this will shock you, I actually got Ben set up, and we interviewed him for an hour and a half in his hotel room. And you can watch it. It's, to me, the greatest interview I ever did with anybody. He's just such an articulate, likewise, force of nature. You know, he was about like this. And Ben was here several times. And if you ever get a chance, and we have lots of YouTube of Ben, but in 2010, he gave a speech to students, which we were all the beneficiaries and the viewers of, at Chautauqua, Bellinger, wherever it is. And it's incredible. No dry, I mean, we had to actually shut down the rest of that mornings because Ben nailed it. Because he was speaking directly to the students. There were a boatload of students at Chautauqua, 50, 60 of them came down for this, Drew Biter and company, and he nailed it. Incredible, it's inspirational today, but Ben died this past year, and we continue to stay in touch with his foundation, the Planet Hood Foundation, and with Don Ferencz. And so to Ben, he gave us a lot, whether it was Nuremberg, whether it was here, whether the International Humanitarian Law Dialogues at Chautauqua, Mike, we're coming back, and so all of those good things, we lost Ben. The last one is Mark Russell. Allie, nothing happens without you introducing us to Mark Russell. There, you talk about this spousal connection. I'll try to get through this, I will. It may take a while. But really, 2005, I had the privilege of interviewing Mark out on your lawn for like 3 times, the total of 6 hours. Unbelievable. Unbelievable to sit there. And over time, we became friends. The families became friends. And he gave us so much. So as we all know Mark Russell. He became a friend of everybody. But what an entertainer. What a sportsman, but what a humanitarian. And I could go on. There's a 10th anniversary event where Mark was the entertainment. Stan and others put on that 10th anniversary event, and the finale was Mark, and he just had 300 people, you know, wonderfully. When he showed up, even when he wasn't the star, Phil Donahue. My God, Phil says, Mark Russell's in. And of course, he asked Mark to come on stage. And we remember Bob Woodward, with the flows over by the fireplace. If you haven't seen it, that's must-see YouTube things. And Mark gave of his time for our benefit. I know of at least 3 concerts, one of which I had a smile at because he'd retired. He'd retired, and asked him if he'd consider doing an interview, a fundraising interview, just kind of like Life and Times. What who are the people you met, and how did you get through certain things? And I said, you don't have to play, because he was a little concerned about his playing. So we did it. Place is packed, as you recall. And we did put a little piano up in front, just in case, for demonstration purposes, if the spirit moved. I never asked him. So we talked for like 15, 20 minutes, and of course he had to show an example. Next thing you know, he's up there showing, this is how, Everett Dirksen would do it or something. And then went on, and I think he kind of credited that opportunity to maybe getting a little bit more back to do that again. And we were the beneficiaries of at least 2, 3 of those events, again, at the Jackson Center. We miss him. And Allie, but we know that it was a team. It was the Allie Russell, Mark Russell team. And for those that don't know, never got to Mark Russell to ask those questions without going through Allie. And it was Allie then who said, it's okay to ask him. It's okay to ask him. And I appreciate ever so much your contribution in so many ways to help us at the Robert Jackson Center to have so much presence and really put us on a kind of a national stage. And it's really been the Allie and Mark Russell show. So I wanted to conclude on that, and I think we are ready, Ed. Maybe we're going to cue up something, so if you'll turn here as sort of just a little thing here.
Robert Jackson, speaking for the majority, offered us this wonderful, wonderful passage. If there is any fixed star in our constitutional constellation, it is that no official, high or petty, can prescribe what shall be orthodox in religion, nationalism, politics, or any other matter of opinion, nor may he force to confess by word or act a belief therein.
When Phil Donahue was at the Jackson Center a few months ago, and he spoke eloquently about some of these cases, he focused on the Jehovah's Witness case, West Virginia Board of Education versus the Barnett sisters. And Phil Donahue quoted Justice Jackson, and we have to hang on to something, and he called it a fixed star. That's it. You got to hang on to something. A fixed star in our constitutional constellation, and I thought, I'm gonna memorize it like Phil did because it's so profound. And with your permission, I'd like to sing it as well. I got a piano here. If there is any fixed star, if there is any fixed star, if there is any fixed star in our constitutional constellation, it is that no official, high or petty, can prescribe what shall be orthodox in politics, nationalism, or religion, or any matters of opinion, or force citizens to confess by word or by act their faith therein.